Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Jamie Salter, and I am joining you from San Diego, California. I work as a full-time self-image consultant as a co-author of the intervention, but my background and training is that I was trained as a school psychologist, a board-certified behavior analyst, and I worked as an administrator in special education for about a decade. So glad to have you here, and I'm going to introduce the co-author of the Self-Image System, Dr. Katie Croce.
Hi, everybody. I am Dr. Katie Croce. I'm here with you from a little chilly Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I am the co-author of the Self-Image System, and I worked as a board certified behavior analyst in public schools, private schools, homes, clinics, and in university settings for the past 20-ish years. So glad to be here with you and tell you a little bit about our intervention.
Yeah, and as we kick things off, I kind of want to address the elephant in the room. And that elephant is that behaviors are on the rise. And what you're seeing in your schools or your clinics is unfortunately not unique to any part of the US or Canada or the world. But an article recently came out from the LA Times, and it basically said everything that we've been feeling anecdotally. This came out last month, and they were saying that behaviors are on the rise, even amongst the littlest children. And that information is really being found in the research too. So I just kind of wanted to normalize things and say, if you're here because you're experiencing behaviors in your setting, you're not alone, but we want to help you figure out how you can kind of solve those behaviors. And that's why that Katie and I both stepped away from our careers in public education to speak full time about how to set up successful self-monitoring interventions. This QR code is not one you can scan, but the reason it's here is because as you go through this slide deck, whether we email it to you after watching today live or if you're watching the recording, you'll see lots of different QR codes, and you can scan those later on if you want more information. But over these next 15-20 minutes, we're going to talk to you about what self-image is, how you can use it to support behavioral success as a tier one, tier two, or tier three tool, how you can align it to IEPs if you're working in the school setting, and what type of training opportunities there are for your team. And we will email you the recording after today's session.
Yeah. And so, as we get into this, we wanted to give you a little bit of background about our passion for self-monitoring and, why we think that this is such a valuable tool for you to invest in for the students and clients that you're supporting. So, over the years, we spent a lot of time researching self-monitoring, and what we have found is that by systematically teaching individuals to engage in pro-social behaviors, we are helping them to increase their quality of life, right? And so for all of us, we get into this work because we want to make people's lives as, independent and as successful as possible for them. And so that's really what this comes down to for us, is really giving you a tool that can help your clients and your students become better versions of themselves and better able to access their instruction, access their community, and ultimately increasing their quality of life.
And here's that first QR code I was talking about. This one will lead you to our website if you're not familiar with the self-image system and you need some very basic information. But at the core of what this intervention is it's a manualized self-monitoring tool with an embedded accountability check. So we know there's a lot of systems being used in schools, whether it's a token system or a point system or a marble jar, where we're telling students how they're doing. But we're really looking with self-imagine ways to have our students stop and reflect on how they're doing and to teach them to self-reflect with also having that accountability partner built in. The intervention is used in general education classrooms with general education students as well as students with IEPs. It's also used in self-contained classrooms and learning support type settings as well as class-wide within self-contained classes for kids with severe emotional behavioral challenges or autism or other unique learning needs. It can be used standalone, and it also can complement other evidence-based practices that are being used within your setting. So when you get this intervention, the launch point is a systematic planning guide. We really like to say that you should not just grab a form that you've seen from someone and think that you're setting up a self and match system, but that pre-planning that goes in, and Katie will talk through as we go through our take-home messages in a minute, are really what lead you to a successful intervention. And what you'll see as Katie kind of walks us through these four take-home messages is at the root of this system are some key components that you'll see with every single self and match system. Everything beyond that is individualized to support the learners or the group of learners that you're working with. So Katie, what's that first take-home message?
Yeah, so the first thing that we always want to explain to teams is, as Jamie mentioned, it's not just the form, right? There is this considerations guide that is embedded within our self and match system that is your roadmap that helps you develop the most successful intervention for either the client or the student or classroom or school that you're supporting. And that happens through collaboration. So that systematic planning with the team that's invested in the learner or the students or the client that you're supporting is going to make such a difference, and that roadmap is critical. So completing that roadmap is number one.
Number two is that we're aiming for progress, not perfection. When we set up self and match systems for the students or clients that we're supporting, we're really focusing on a growth mindset and how can our learners be the best version of themselves, but we're not looking at 100% days in order to access reinforcement. We're really looking at how can we support our children to make that progress and close that gap so that they can better access their learning and better be a citizen in your classrooms that you support.
And the next thing is to recognize that the intervention that you start off with on day one is not the intervention that you want to have in place a month from now or 6 months from now. As your clients and students are growing and making progress, we want to keep evolving the intervention to get them to the fullest capacity of independence and successfulness that they can achieve in their school and home environments.
We do. And the way we do that is by making database decisions and using that data to really monitor progress, potentially use that data to report progress on goals and to determine fading. And one of the beauties of this intervention is not just the behavior change you see with the students and the learners you support, but also the data that you can glean to really be coaching your staff on making database decisions. So, Katie, why is it called the self and match system instead of just self and match?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it isn't just a form, as Jamie has mentioned. Our manual includes information. There's introductory materials to get you familiar with what self-monitoring is and the evidence behind self-monitoring. We have considerations guide, not just the considerations guide that you use to develop your interventions from the beginning, but we also have a considerations guide to implement during the implementation of your intervention to help keep refining and refocusing to make sure that you're using the most effective version of the intervention possible. We also have about 20 sample forms in there to give you visuals of what this could look like for your learners. And a ton of supplemental materials are also available, data sheets and letters home to parents and training guides for teachers. There's also access to our online portal, which has a lot of those same resources that are downloadable. We also have videos that you can watch to learn a little bit more in troubleshooting areas. We have a digital self and match form that schools can access, that teachers can access, that behavior analysts can access if they want to use a digital form. And we also have our self and match maker, which is a forms creator. So if you're, worried about how do I make these forms look so nice? Well, we've thought about all of those things for you, and they're all included in the manual.
Yeah, and Katie, I often like to say that we did not author self-monitoring interventions. We did not even author self-monitoring interventions with an accountability component. That's been researched since the 70s, and we just found that research sitting on the shelf, not being implemented with integrity. And so we kind of set up this guide for you of how do you set it up with success. And that's what we go through in our trainings, which we'll talk about before our time is over today. But when you're first setting up that self and match system, you're getting to know your manual. You're getting a team together to pre-plan the intervention, going through that scripted guide that Katie alluded to. Then you're creating the forms. Then you're getting team input on the forms. And then you're implementing the system and ultimately regularly assessing the data and making changes. So there are some similar procedures in every single self-image system. As I alluded, everything beyond this is individualized based on each learner you support. So that bottom right corner is that considerations guide that we've been mentioning to you. And that's one of the key things that makes self-image different than other self-monitoring systems. But then also the procedure is what makes self-image different. So Katie, will you talk us through that?
Yeah, so for those of you who have never seen Self-Image in action before, we wanted to give you a little taste of it before we leave here today. So the first step is that the learner or the client will always answer the questions that are on their Self-Image form independently first. Then the staff will also answer the same questions independently. That's that accountability component that Jamie mentioned earlier. Then we look at their answers and we look and compare those answers and we look for matches. We're looking to see if there are yes matches and no matches. Then the students receive points based on their matches. If they have a yes match, they get 2 or more points. And they get 2 or more points because they engage in the expected behavior and they also engage in honest self-reflection. If the learner says no and the staff says no, that is a no match, and the learner still receives 1 point for that honest self-reflection. As Jamie mentioned, we really believe in that growth mindset, and the first step in making a behavior change is recognizing that you might need to work on a behavior that is targeted for change in your self-image system. So we want to reinforce that honest self-reflection with those learners. So even in a moment where we have to give corrective feedback, we can also say, you know what, Jamie, thank you so much for being honest. I'm so proud of you for being honest. So we can give them praise even when we're having to give them that corrective feedback. And the last step is that at some point in time, based on something you've identified in your considerations guide, the learner gets access to reinforcement.
Yes, but all of those are individualized, right? Based on each learner's needs. So in terms of when we lead our trainings, we have found that, if you have a training, there is a deeper level of knowledge than you get just by reading something. We have also found that if in your training you model and you interact and you kind of touch and feel the intervention, you leave even more prepared. And there's a lot of research that talks about that modeling in trainings, how it's more effective. And because of that, in our training, we fill out a self-image form 3 times each time we lead a training. And the 3 target areas we set are: was I respectful? Did I follow directions? And did I use good personal space? Now, you might be watching this thinking, they have a question about personal space on a training form when you're asking adults in a training session? And the answer is yes. And the reason we have a question about personal space is because we like to talk with our attendees about how every single self-image form you create, you're going to have an attainable question. The reason that's so powerful for our learners is because oftentimes our learners hear no all the time. They hear all the things that they're not doing correctly. So having that attainable question on the form really sets our students up for success. You'll see that every form always has that reinforcement or reward built in on it. It has a place for a date, so you have the data. But in this particular form, once every 3 hour or once every hour for 3 hours, we stop and reflect on: was I respectful, following directions, and using good personal space? We write in a yes or a no, and then the teacher responds, and then there's points assigned. Now let's look at a form that maybe is for a learner that has more unique needs or abilities.
Yeah, I love identifying this as a learner that is more uniquely abled because this could be for a preschool level learner, but it could also be for a high school or adult transition learner who is more impacted, right? And so, in addition to the questions, it's the same exact questions that we saw on the previous form. We supplement some visual supports there for them to help them understand what those questions are. We also have 5 rating opportunities in the same amount of time that we would have had 3 rating opportunities for that previous learner, because maybe this learner's behaviors impact their ability to be successful a little bit more frequently. So we want to check in more often with them. You can also see, instead of having the learner write yeses and nos or Ys and Ns, we have smiles and frowns listed here because we want to make it easy access for them. We don't want there to be any frustration if writing is a challenge for our individuals. We want to make it easy for them to be able to utilize the intervention, so they can either circle or they can color in the smiles or frowns. We also have these little boxes in the bottom right-hand corner of the teacher column. Those are there for supplemental support. So if you have a learner who is, have some emerging math skills, we might be able to write a little number two in here if that's a yes match, another two in here if that's a yes match, and a one in here if this is a no match to help them count. Two plus two is four, plus one is five, and we write the number of points in here. We also know that that might be too complex for some of our learners. So we have in this column here, 5 or 6 points equals a star. If they get 5 or 6 points, we fill that star in here. And also up at the top, we have a little visual guide to help show them that they're getting closer and closer to their goal. So these are just a couple of ways that you can make some modifications to the intervention, still staying true to the system, but customizing it to meet the needs of your learner.
Yeah, and Katie, I think we've alluded to this, but self-match is really being utilized as a tier one, a tier two, and a tier three intervention because we're seeing general education classrooms using self-match looking very different than the ones we just showed you as a tier one tool across the entire general ed class. And we can show you those in more detail if we ever meet with you for a follow-up session. But in terms of those resources, Katie alluded to the fact that the manual does include a resource portal, and there'll be links to that right in your PowerPoint. We have links to your online access of your PDF creator as well as your digital self-match form. And Katie, how many different ways are there to make these forms?
I feel like every day we're adding more. But right now, there is at least 6 ways and potentially a seventh that we can talk to you about as well. You can use Maker, you can use the digital forms that are in the portal, you can download an Excel or Word forms that are from our portal. You can create one from scratch. Some of the best ones that we've seen are ones that teachers have created from scratch. If there's one in the manuals that you like, you can email us, and we can also consult with you and create individual forms for your organizations.
And as she alluded, the seventh way, I suppose, is we have partnered with Data Makes the Difference, who has created the VB Map app, the Essentials for Living app, and we are launching a self-match app very, very soon. So as you get to next year, you'll see that. So I think we've talked a lot about the benefits of this intervention, the fact that it aligns with IEP goals, the fact that it gives your team and your classrooms just tools they can lean on as they're systematically teaching self-monitoring. The last part I wanted to make sure we told you about is the training opportunities. And when you scan this QR code, you'll be taken to a page where we have 11 different training opportunities. We have intro workshops, we have follow-up workshops, we have advanced workshops or parent workshops or workshops if you want to have us come to your conference or lead more of a generic workshop. So we love talking about this. If it's something that you want to talk about more, we're happy to hop on a Zoom with you and just talk with you for 15, 20 minutes about what different types of trainings we could offer for your school, for your district, for your SELPA, your intermediate unit. We love to do consortium training so people can come from everywhere. And there's a ton of research on self-match, and there's more coming. So we always welcome your team to research. And I know we just got to scratch the surface. So if you want to hear more about us, you can check us out on a recent podcast we were on with Matt Sikoria. And lastly, and most importantly, stay in touch with us. You can email us. You can find us on social media. We're kind of always around, but we hit that 20-minute mark. We got through all of the content we wanted to talk through, but we want to answer your questions too. So if you're watching this recording, you can absolutely email us with questions you have, and we can set up a time to talk. But if you're live, I'm going to stop the recording now and see what questions anyone has. So let me go ahead and stop the recording. And let me